Let's get back to the bishop c5 main line and finally analyze this many times mentioned knight b3. Bishop c5, knight b3, bishop b6, knight c3. Black has to decide here where to develop his knight, to f6, to e7, or just wait and play d6. Let's start with knight ge7. White plays here bishop g5, and the pin is very unpleasant for black. So unpleasant that he's even ready to play this ugly move, f6. Bishop h4, castle. Queen d2. Our plan is very easy. First, we want to develop and then take care of kingside attack. d6, long castle, bishop e6, f4. Both sides developed, but there is no clear plan for black. If he plays bishop f7, then g4 comes with g5 ideas. If queen d7, white can simply go king b1, always useful move. And here, I don't know what is black up to. a5 is not good because of bishop b5, white has clear advantage. Otherwise, simple moves like h3, g4 and g5 would give white very nice attack. If on bishop g5, black plays castle, queen d2, d6, long castle, and bishop e6, once again, a5 is not that great because of bishop b5. And if bishop e6, we will drop our bishop back here on e3. Why? Because if we start attack like f4, then our bishop on g5 is a little bit awkwardly placed. Black can play queen e8, and we don't have g4, or if we have h3, g4, then there is no g5, and it can always come under attack. I think in introduction I also mentioned that it is very good to trade the dark squared bishop. Then white's life would be much easier. This is why bishop e3 is very nice move. f5. Black of course has to do something. If he plays normal moves like queen d7, we would just take on b6, ab, and we can already realize that there is no attack on the queen side. We will go king b1, and there is simply no piece that can attack the queen side and the king on the queen side. Though it's important here to know after bishop b3 which pawn has to be on b3, and it's going to be the c pawn. We really don't want to touch the a pawn. We would go a3, not ab, a3, but not ab. Okay, so if f5, we take on f5, knight f5, take on b6, take on b6, and king b1. Once again, there is no real attack on the queen side, and we can start our own play on the king side with f4, g4, or g3, bishop g2. Once again, we have to know that bishop b3 is met with cb, and knight b4 is met with a3. That's it for bishop g5 castle. Let's see what happens on d6, and another plan with connected with long castle and not short castle. Queen d2, bishop e6, long castle, queen d7. Black wants to castle long side, and after king b1, there we go, long castle. But here, bishop b5, another nasty pin. Look at it, bishop g5, bishop b5. That's really nice combination. f6. If a6, it would not work, because then we take on c6 and black is forced to take with a pawn. And he really didn't want to have this structure when the king is on c8 already. So after bishop b5, f6 should be played to be able to play a6 afterwards and take on c6 with the piece. We drop on e3 and queen e8. If a6, then we would take first on c6, queen c6, knight d5. That's a lovely move. You cannot take knight d5 because it would lose the piece. And bishop d5, e d5, black is forced to take on e3, queen e3, queen d7, and very annoying queen a7, I think, gives white pleasant advantage. If bishop e3 and queen e8, which was played in the game once again between my husband Anish Giri and Svetushkin in 2009, knight d5 here gives white pleasant edge. And why? First of all, knight d5 once again is not possible. Bishop d5 as well is not possible because there is this nasty pin on a4 e8 diagonal. So bishop d7 was played. Now, very logical, rook h e1. Knight e5. Black finally wants to get rid of passive position, exchange some pieces and have some space. Bishop f1. No, we are not going to give black easy life. Knight d5, e d5. Now f4 is coming, so black played g5, bishop b6, a b6, and very important move, well done my husband, rook e4. This is very important because if white allows black to develop normally, then he can have some play in the center or on queen side or king side. Queen side is very unlikely though. Queen g6, rook b4. You might think like, what is that great in this maneuver? Rook e4, rook b4, what it is doing? It's not attacking. The b6 pawn will always be protected. And this rook, is not it awkward on the b4? But no, it is very important to have a rook on b4 because it helps in attack. And a4, a5 cannot be stopped. Rook d e8, a4. Rook e7, queen c3. Now rook b6 is hanging. Knight g4. Okay, f2 pawn is hanging, but we don't care. a5, knight f2, ab, queen c7 is mate, and it is completely crushing for white. I think here Svetushkin resigned. That's it for knight e7. Let's see what happens on d6. d6 is a very nice waiting move because we don't know where the g8 knight will go, to e7 or to f6. This is why we play queen e2. I will once again repeat myself that it is very important to trade the dark squared bishop, so queen e2 is connected with bishop e3 move. Knight g e7. It's possible to play knight f6 here, but knight g7 and knight f6 both are met with bishop e3, bishop e6, long castle, queen e7, and g3. This was the game between Caruana Malachov 2013 Tromsø. And here, when I mentioned that white has lots of plans and variety of plans, this is what I meant. Sometimes we go f4, sometimes we go g3, sometimes we develop our bishop via g2, sometimes we take on b6. It's just important in this line to know many ideas, and then plans will show up themselves. Long castle, bishop g2. I think it's very pleasant position for white because once again we have many ideas connected with f4, connected with knight d5, connected with bishop b6, rook h e1. So it's not that great for black to play knight f6, knight g e7, also not very wow move, bishop e3, castle, long castle, and f5. This is important line because black is not playing passive. He has some real plan and we have to pay attention to it. This game, again, was between my husband Anish Giri and Navara. They apparently have some theoretical battle in Scotch in 2012. And here Anish played a very interesting move, f4. This is a temporary sacrifice of the pawn, because after f takes e4, the idea is not to take back on e4, but play g3. So we did not want to allow f4. We also did not want to take back on f5, because then knight f5, we have to take on b6, and the king is safe on g8 for now, and black would have some nasty ideas on the queen side. But after f4, f takes e4, g3, black probably takes on e3, queen e3, just because to play bishop g4 and to develop. Bishop e2 and knight f5. There is no way, no real way to defend this pawn on e4. For example, if instead of bishop g4, black plays bishop f5, we can anyway take the pawn on e4, or first we can give check on c4. We can even go bishop g2. This pawn won't go anywhere. That is why after queen e3, bishop g4, bishop e2, black plays knight f5 to open up some lines. Queen e4, bishop e2. Queen e2, well, I have to mention that rook e8 here did not work, because we have a great check and the piece on g4 would be hanging. So after queen e4, black has to take on e2, queen e2. Queen e8 happened in the game, but queen c4, queen f7, and now queen b5. The pawn on b7 is hanging, so black has to do something. He played rook a b8, and after rook h e1, this looks much pleasant for white rather than for black. Black has no counterattack on the queen side, and we have lots of files. Also, d5 square is very important. It looks very nice. Okay, now let's get back and see the main line. Knight c3, knight f6. Here white has two options. One is to go same plan, queen e2 and bishop e3, and another one is bishop g5, which I like the most. First, let's see what happens on queen e2 and why I'm not that happy about it. Because black does not play here the normal castle or d6, but instead plays very interesting a5. Queen e2 blocked the bishop on f1, so we cannot go bishop b5 anymore. Black is using this fact and plays a5. We have to go a4 or e5. e5 is also interesting, but here starts the complicated and sharp lines, so be focused. Castle. White is threatening to take the piece on f6, and he does so, but after a4, we have to move the knight, knight d5. Actually, if we moved the knight here, then rook e8 would be very unpleasant. Knight c4 or de4, it would be under d5, and that would not be so nice for us. So e5, castle a4, and knight d5, rook e8, bishop e3, and now ab. Now we cannot take ab. If we take c takes b3, there is no time for it, because black has very nasty check on a5. We cannot play bishop d2, we don't want to move the king to d1, and b4 is also not an option because of knight b4. That's why after ab, queen goes to g4. We want to mate, give mate on g7, g6, and bishop c4. We have to ignore that the pawn is on b3. Knight b4. This is a very powerful counterattack. Knight b4 and d5. Wow, such sharp lines. everything gets so messy, but it's all under control, no worries. And black has to find moves like knight b4 and d5. That's not so easy, right? Queen f4, d takes c4, castle, b takes c2, knight d5. How about this move? It's not competition of blundering the pieces. I know, it looks very weird, but it is very important because black cannot take the knight on d5 because of very nice little mate here on g7. And we did not play queen h6 obviously because the f6 pawn was hanging. That's why knight d5 serves the purpose of queen h6 because it defends the pawn on f6. Rook e6 is a must move, and after rook e6, after rook e6, queen c4. We take this pawn, bishop e3, f takes e3, and b5. That's also a very strong move because black needs to develop and to get this bishop free space. Of course, queen b5 is not an option because of c6, and we're losing the piece on d5. Queen c5 was played, bishop b7, knight e7, king h8, queen c2, and rook a6. This was a brilliant game between Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Magnus Carlsen in St. Louis 2014. It was indeed a very nice, powerful game, which shows how sharp this Scotch can be. If white is sharp and he has to find some brilliant moves, black has to do something as well. So after queen e2, a5, e5 is a very interesting option, but you have to know some lines and you have to be ready for sharp and complicated lines, and also black has to prove that he is not worth in theoretical battle. Another option on queen e2, a5 is a4. This is more or less call option. Castle, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, and knight d4. That's the move which shows that black cannot simply develop slowly with d6 and allow castle. Black has to do something. He has to hurry up. Otherwise, white will get space, develop, and then have attack on the king side. Knight d4, queen d3, knight b3, take on b3, c6. Once again, c6, not d6. c6 serves the purpose of d5, long castle, and anyway d5. There are lots of pins on the d file and on d8 queen with the bishop standing on h4, but black has to break the center. So after d5, e takes d5, c takes d5, knight d5, g5. Black, of course, did not give up the pawn like this. Knight d5, knight f6 is a possibility here, but on knight f6, queen f6, and bishop g3, white has a pawn, but he is losing because rook d8 comes. We have to move the queen. Let's say queen c2, it would come under bishop f5, so queen f3. And still bishop f5, and look at this king. This is not what we wanted. This is just a disaster for white. That's why we shouldn't be greedy, and we should pay attention to black's threats as well. g5, queen f3. Now you cannot take on h4 because knight f6 would be disaster for black. Knight d5, rook d5, queen c7 check, bishop c4, and bishop e6. G takes h4 is a valid option, but still the same would happen what happened in the game of Nataf Fressinet in 2016. Queen f6, and there is no way that black can avoid the perpetual check with rook g5. Rook g5, hg, queen g5, and here is the perpetual check. So this line leads to perpetual check. Bishop c4, bishop e6, once again bishop g5 happened, bishop d5, of course hg, rook g5 would lose, so bishop d5, queen d5, take on g5, and the game ended in perpetual check. So, of course, queen e2 is a very valid option, and there you have two options on a5 to go e5 or a4. I think a5 is the most critical line, that's why I cover it in this video. But my main recommendation is to play knight f6 and bishop g5. I like to pin this knight because then we provocate something which we can use later on. Bishop g5, h6, bishop h4. Here black can play two moves, d6 or queen e7. d6 was played in the game against between Anish and Fressinet in 2016. f3 is a good move to defend the e4 pawn and have some space for the bishop. Bishop e6 and bishop b5. Again, another pin. We know that bishop g5, bishop b5 can be very nasty for black. So bishop b5 is a good move here. a6, take on c6, take on c6, and queen e2. White had a very pleasant advantage, and the game was indeed brilliant. Now let's take a look on bishop h4 if black plays queen e7. Here I would like to show you two options for white once again. One was played between, once again, Anish and Fressinet in Paris 2016. And another one was played, I think it was an improvement on Anish's game, between Dominguez and Fressinet 2016. So everybody is playing Scotch against Fressinet. Bishop c4. I think is an improvement, but bishop d3 happened in Anish's game. g5, bishop g3, d5. This is very important. The breakthrough in the center. Queen e7 served the purpose of the pin of the pawn on e4 and d5 break. So we see that black does not have time for slow play and slow development. He right away has to do something in the center. Queen e2, d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop e4, and bishop d7. Black equalized the game, and he has perfectly fine position. That's why on bishop h4, queen e7, bishop c4 is what Dominguez chose against Fressinet. g5, bishop g3, and in the game d6 was played. Though I think very interesting option for black is to play d5, which is another improvement on Dominguez Fressinet game, though it was not played yet. Bishop d5, knight d5, knight d5, queen e4, and king f1. I think this is quite complicated position. I would still think that white has better chances than black, because my king, okay, I did not want to put it on f1. I would like to have rook on f1 and king on g1, But my knight on d5 is quite good. The pawn on c7 is hanging, and if I get rid of this queen from d1, then rook e1 would be also a very nice move for me. King f8 is the only move that black can play. Of course, big threat was to play knight f6. That's why black could not castle, because of knight f6. And king f1, king f8. Now there is 1-1. I have king on f8, black has king on, I have king on f1, black has king on f8. And here, yeah, h4 is a completely possible move with a nice complicated position. So bishop g3, d6 was played, queen e2, bishop d7, long castle, rook h e1, knight e5, and a4. This was a very interesting move and a very interesting, it was not a game actually, because here Dominguez played on rook h1, knight e5, knight d4. And he managed to win, and it was very interesting game. But another interesting move that I am recommending is to play a4. To include this move, because we want to play a5, obviously, and I think that a5, a4 is favorable for white rather than for black, because then this b5 square is quite annoying, and then to play knight d4 with the same plan like in Dominguez game. That's it for this knight b3 complicated line. I know there are lots of critical positions that you have to remember, but most important in this line is to know the ideas, to know the plans, because there are various plans. Sometimes we go bishop e3, sometimes we go bishop g5, sometimes we go queen e2, sometimes we go f4, sometimes we go g3. But when you know all these plans, then you can choose between one of them. And it gives very sharp and lively play. This is what I like in Scotch. Once again, let's take a look. Knight c3, knight f6, and here you have two options. On queen e2, a5, you can play e5 with a very complicated game and play between Bashir Lagrave and Magnus Carlsen, or you could go for a quite solid option a4, which leads to a perpetual check in the end, but you have to remember the line, and of course your opponent has to know the good moves and great sacrifices. Another option is bishop g5 to go for these sharp positions, h6, bishop h4, and queen e7 here is critical to be able to break through in the center. And of course bishop c4, a very interesting improvement on Anisha's game, g5, bishop g3, d6, and queen e2 with the plans which we already covered in this video. I wish you very good luck for this line. I hope that it all goes great. So see you in the next video.